The Commuter is a lazy, predictable, and just all-around terrible film. I'd warn you that there are spoilers coming up in this review here, but in the first 20 minutes, you'll be able to figure out the entire film anyway. So, what does it matter? Chris here from MTR Network, and I'm back to review The Commuter. Yet another Liam Neeson movie that makes you wonder if his special set of skills is he has to make terrible movies. Now you might be saying, but Chris, on Rotten Tomatoes is at 70%. Look closer. It doesn't have a lot of reviews. Why? Because most critics knew not to waste their time on this film. The ones who did probably went in knowing it would be terrible, so they're grading on a curve. And there's still others like me who realize this movie is just hot fucking garbage and there's no way you can spin it into being any kind of enjoyable film. It's just fucking terrible. If somehow within the first 15 and 20 minutes of this film you haven't figured everything out, then I seriously question how you watch movies. Let me back up and give you an overview of this film so you can understand why I'm so disgusted with this movie. First, the synopsis doesn't really give you a lot of information. A businessman is caught up in a criminal conspiracy during his daily commute home. Liam Neeson plays Michael McCully. The film opens up with a montage of Michael's morning routine of waking up, talking to his family, and his wife dropping him off at the train station to commute to work. The last 10 years he's worked in insurance and he lives outside of New York City, takes a train in. Later on you find out that before he was selling insurance for 10 years, Michael was a police detective. This comes into play later. Through the montage and early on you find out that while Michael and his family are doing well, they lost a lot of their savings in the 2008 financial collapse. They are barely holding on, even though they have a nice house and live in the suburbs and he drives a BMW, and that they're struggling to figure out how they can pay for their mortgage and send their son to an expensive college he wants to go for. No lie, this is literally one of those white people problem things where they're upper middle class and they overextended themselves and now they fuck themselves over, but now they're trying to act like they're the little guys getting screwed over. Mind you fact, he's selling insurance. Now, on this particular day, Michael gets fired from his insurance job and he goes and has a drink with his old detective partner, Alex Murphy, who's played by Patrick Wilson. You also briefly meet Captain Hawthorne, who's played by Sam Neill. It's at this point that if you ever watched The Negotiator or any movie like it, then you already know that either Hawthorne or Murphy are the dirty cops and they're going to be part of the later setup. Now, if you're really smart or even just like kind of half paying attention, then you'll be able to figure out which one between either Hawthorne or Murphy are the dirty cops. It's just like the film that's how stupid the film thinks you are. It thinks it can't obviously figure shit out. So then at the end when the big twist happens, you're literally screaming no shit to Michael. On the commute home, Michael is confronted by Joanne, who's played by Vera Farmiga. Since there's no Conjuring film coming out later this year, or at least I hope not, I'm guessing that Farmiga and Wilson still had to get together because fuck it, right? Anyway, she makes Michael the offer you've seen in the trailer.
What if I asked you to do something that could profoundly affect an individual on this train?
I don't understand.
It's just one little thing. Someone on this train does not belong. All you have to do is find them.
She tells Michael there's $25,000 in one of the bathrooms of the train and it's his if he agrees to find the passenger on the train. He then has one stop to make his decision. Thinking it's a hoax, Michael goes and checks to see if the money's hidden in the bathroom, and it is. There's some problems with the movie breaking its own rules, but I will come back to that. The point is, Michael is supposed to use his detective skills to figure out who the right passenger is. All he's given is that the passenger has a bag with something that doesn't belong to them, and they're getting off at the last stop of the route. Now again, if you've been paying attention to the people on the train at this point, you know exactly who the passenger is. Why? Because the movie is so painfully obvious with the stereotypes, the loud investment banker, the pink-haired punk rocker girl, the black guy with the guitar taste who is very suspicious acting. You can deduce that it's none of them because it's too fucking obvious. So that leaves only one person that you see, but they spend the rest of the movie trying to pretend like isn't there. It is like blatantly fucking obvious. It made watching this film so fucking frustrating, and it's both due to bad directing and bad screenwriting. Within 20 minutes of this movie starting, you know, one, who's going to portray Michael, and two, who the goddamn person he's supposed to be looking for. But you know why Michael doesn't find them? Because he's the worst goddamn detective of all time. He hasn't actually figured anything out. Seriously, entire movie. He doesn't really. At one point, Michael, who is a commuter of this train for 10 years, and is also a detective, asks one of the conductors if they have a manifest of all the passengers who will get off in one stop. Dude, you've been commuting on this train for 10 years. Did you ever have to submit that information? Beyond that, you're a fucking detective. You should know if a commuter train has that information. So the fact that he actually went and asked is fucking stupid. He would never be able to do it. It makes no fucking sense. Beyond that, the process he goes to try to figure out who the passenger is just stupid, creepy, and fucking obvious. It's like, he literally goes around, like, basically, is it you? Like, it's dumbest thing ever. Perhaps the most accurate thing about this film is that Michael is a former NYPD detective because his detective skills seem to boil down to him being obvious as shit, profiling anyone who looks different, like, say, and by different I mean they have a tattoo, and then 3, stereotyping and harassing black and brown people. No shit, at one point, he literally goes to conductor and suggests that there's 2 or maybe 3 people that are suspicious to him. Just so happens that 2 of the 3 is a Latino woman, a black guy, and then there is like one white dude with tattoos. So, but the one that gets harassed is the Latina woman who the conductor goes and tries to search her bag. It is literally the most heavy-handed and obvious and NYPD thing I've ever fucking seen in my life. It's fucking ridiculous. And that's literally the extent of his detective skills. He goes through each person getting off the last stop and basically accuses them all wrongly until he's left with only one possible solution, who you as an audience member already know it is. That's literally what happens here. And that's why it makes sense that Michael will be an NYPD detective. The NYPD is known for being heavy-handed, not being able to recognize cell phones from guns, and their powers of perception are pretty goddamn limited to begin with. I mean, look at these idiots. So yeah, maybe Michael is the worst detective, but that would makes him fit in right in with the NYPD. But it still makes for a really terrible, shitty movie. Like, I don't understand how anybody thinks this makes the NYPD look pretty good. As a little aside, can we talk about this trend where really trash-ass white dudes in law enforcement get presented as heroes with some redemptive arc? It's easy to trash it in a movie as garbage as The Commuter, but what about the good movies like Three Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri? Let me be clear. Frances Dormand is great in that film. I think it's a good movie. I even think Sam Rockwell deserves a nomination for Best Supporting Actor. However, make no mistake, Sam Rockwell's character Dixon in that film is 1000% trash, and despite the attempt at a redemptive arc at the end of the film, the point should be he's still trash. In the course of that movie, Rockwell's Dixon is shown to be a pretty terrible ass police officer. First, it's alluded to, but not explained, that he has a history of beating up and abusing black suspects. They literally say that. Then, in an attempt to silence Dormand's character, he goes after her co-worker, a black woman, by having her arrested for a minimal amount of weed. But perhaps the most egregious and just terrible thing he does in this film, he literally goes and beats up a gay man who's helping the lead character. He damn near kills this man. He first beats him, then throws him out the window. He does this in full view of everyone in town, then goes back to work as a officer, literally walks into his desk. The only thing that stops him is that the new black acting chief of police fires his ass for being a racist, bigoted piece of shit. Everyone else, though, they suggest that he's a really good man. Woody Harrelson's character commits suicide and leaves a note to Dixon, literally telling him that he knows deep down inside he's a good man and a good cop, and he sees the potential in him. It's fucking ridiculous. So I guess that explains why he let Dixon be the racist good old boy. It's also it's just an absurd depiction that honestly hits close to home because we know this is exactly how bad cops exist and are allowed to continue to exist. Nothing about Dixon is redeemable. Even in the end, when he goes off and he tries to do an ounce, literally the bare minimum of police work, it still shouldn't be enough to applaud him for all the terrible shit he's done before. He deserves to be in jail, not free to have a redemptive arc. Like, I'm sorry for getting off topic with talking about another film, but I really wanted to broach this subject since we haven't done a review for that movie yet, and seeing The Commuter really reminded me how low the bar is for mediocre white men in law enforcement. Like, seriously, the whole premise in The Commuter is that Michael is some kind of great detective. But at no point do you see him actually being a good detective. Matter of fact, most times he ends up being fucking wrong. I cannot stress this enough. Everyone he accuses of being the person he's supposed to be finding, he's wrong about. Like, literally every single one of them. And it's not until he gets to every single person and he's left with no other option that he finally figures out that, oh, it's you. He shows, it is just, again, the other things that bother me with this is the fact that, you know, black and brown people are presented as the suspects and the way he treats them at some points, and just being like, it just goes to show me that there really wasn't anybody to really go, hey, you know what, maybe the optics of this look bad, but then again, he's an NYPD officer and this kind of standard operating procedure, I still thought it was kind of fucking bullshit. Anyway, so remember earlier when I said that they were going to come back to something about, you know, when Michael took the money, I was going to come back to something there. So this film does this weird thing where it claims that there are rules that Michael is supposed to follow, yet he was told no rules. Say what you want about the first, you know, the Saw movies, but Jigsaw always had rules to his game. He laid it out specifically what you could and couldn't do and what the consequences were. Like, he gave you a choice, you made your choice, and it was going to, you know, they suck sometimes, but you knew what it was. Remember, Joanne's whole initial offer to Michael is just that it's a hypothetical. She says, and then she walks off the train. After Michael finds the money, he goes to get off the train at the next stop, and he's stopped by someone who says, you took the money, so you agreed to do this. He says, no. I was basically going to turn it in. At that point, the person says, they thought you might say that, and that person shows him his wife's wedding ring, saying, basically, you do this or your wife is dead. Now, let me be clear. Nothing is wrong with that, and it makes perfect sense. It makes sense that he would be basically blackmailed into doing this by threatening his family. That is, until the movie decides to shit on that by having Joanne tell Michael all the time that he agreed to do this and he's breaking the rules. Wait a minute. That's not true. Like, you're forcing him to do this. When Michael borrows a phone from borrows another passenger's cell phone to call the cops, Joanne calls him and tells him he's breaking the rules. But at no point did she ever tell him what the rules were. She never said, hey, you can't call the police. I mean, it's obvious that she wouldn't want him to do that, but she never told him that. Also, she has people killed because Michael hasn't done what she asked. She says, this is your fault. You took the money. But she skips over the fact that he was turning the money down. It's an infuriating theme of this film because it happens throughout. You're in this situation because of the decision you made, Michael. No, he's not. You threatened his family. You basically insinuated if you didn't do what he wanted you to do, you'd kill his wife and son. That's not him making choices that you're forcing him to make. Like, that was never the original scenario. The original scenario was, hey, what if you go out, what if I asked you to go and find this one person for me? Would you be able to do it? You don't know what's going to happen to them, but like, that's not the scenario that actually happens. What actually happens is you offer him this money. He basically says, oh, I'm not going to do this. Sounds kind of fishy. Then you go, well, yeah, well, if you don't do it, we're going to kill your wife and child. Well, that's a whole different thing. You've now not pitted him against his love for money or anything like that. You've pitted him against his love for his family. Like, it's like they had one idea that what they want to do with this film and they went to a totally fucking different direction. It's just fucking stupid. I want to make it very, very clear that I've seen a lot of ridiculous action scenes in my life. I'm a fan of the Fast and Furious series. I watched them bring down a military cargo jet with sports cars and grapple hooks. I watched them skydive cars and, racing down the side of a fucking mountain. I watched Vin Diesel and Paul Walker jump a car from one skyscraper in Dubai to another one. I've watched all that crazy, unbelievable shit, and it all looked more believable than the goddamn train derailment in The Commuter.
I'm not gonna let them hurt you.
So at one point near the end of the movie, Michael and the train engineer are trying to uncouple the last car from the rest of the train before it derails when it hits an upcoming curve. Now, first off, the scene makes no sense because, well, the train car still derails and everyone in the car should be dead. But let's forget about that. I'm okay with the impossible shit. My problem is the scene looks fucking terrible. I mean, you get a glimpse of it in the trailer, and look, it's even worse than that. It goes on for way too long, and it feels as if in the middle of this film they said, fuck it guys, we have money to blow, let's make a really shitty train derailment scene. Watch... Watching The Rock reach out of his vehicle that's driving on ice and push a torpedo off to blow up another vehicle made more logical sense than anything in this train scene. It's so bad. The CG, everything about it makes no sense. It looks completely fucking terrible and over the top. It's just bad. Going back to the theme of the original, I started with this. This is the most predictable movie I have ever watched. Sure, I know what you're thinking. But Chris, it's a Liam Neeson movie. Of course it's predictable. No, I'm talking outside of that. Outside the fact there's the typical things that happen in a Liam Neeson movie. This movie does things with the story that are so obvious to anyone who's ever watched a thriller or crime drama that there's no way you don't know what's going to happen. And that's hard in a film like this that is predicated on a mystery of who is the passenger. If they weren't so lazy and they actually wrote an actual script, the whole mystery behind who the passenger was, it could have been cleverly disguised. First of all, we already had a mystery on a train movie a few months ago. It was called Murder on the Orient Express. And it wasn't as good as it should have been, but it's basically what the Commuter is. You have a detective on a train. He's surrounded by a bunch of people with secrets. He has to find out which one of them committed a murder. In the Commuter, it's the detective on the train, and he has to figure out which one of the passengers is a target. It's the same fucking movie. The only difference is Michael's such a terrible detective that he can't figure it out. And if you've seen The Murder on Orient Express or The Negotiator or any other film like this, you know exactly what each and every one of the twists and turns is. After the ridiculous train derailment scene, I was able to literally predict how the last 10 minutes of the movie would go. No bullshit. I looked over at Phenom sitting right next beside me and I said, and now this is going to happen. And a few seconds later, it would happen. Now they're going to do this. A few seconds later, it would happen. I'm going to give you the generic breakdown of what happens here. You know, because honestly, if you're listening to this, you're probably not going to go see this fucking film to begin with, all right? Right after the train derailment, everyone will magically be okay because, fuck it, they're not going to have anybody dead. Even though somebody should be, fine, whatever. And I'm okay with that because that's just what happens in this kind of film. Then the cops would show up, and of course, it would be the two characters from the beginning of the movie, and you'd be left to try to figure out which one of them was the dirty cop. Of course, you should probably already fucking know, but fuck it, whatever. And here's a hint. It's the one you thought at the beginning of the film. It's the obvious one. Like, you know. The dirty cop would then try to talk Michael down, but would say a phrase that would tip off Michael that he's the dirty cop. Just like every fucking film you've seen that does this. The dirty cop would then cop to everything in front of all the fucking witnesses, which is fucking stupid because why would you then have to kill? Like, it makes no fucking sense. When the dirty cop would then ask who the mystery passenger is, the mystery passenger stand up and say it's them, but then so will all the other passengers. No bullshit. I knew this was going to happen. It seemed so out there, and I was like, they're going to do that scene. They're going to do that scene where the one passenger stands up and the other passenger stand up and go, no, it's really me. No, it's really me. No, it's really me. Like, it seems so out there, but when you're watching that, somebody going, oh my God, they're going to do that. It's so fucking obvious that they're going to do that. And guess what? They fucking did. Then, of course, comes the struggle. Because obviously, Michael and the dirty cop are going to have a struggle. Michael will get the upper hand. Somehow, there will be some confusion, and the snipers outside would shoot the dirty cop. Because fucking, of course, right? Michael will then be offered his job back as a detective because, again, that's just how everything's going to go. Like, I swear to God, I'm not even trying to spoil the movie by revealing this ending, but it's like, it's so obvious that all this stuff is going to happen. Literally, nobody should be shocked. Like, it's just fucking obvious, and it's painfully obvious because they didn't even try with this script. I'm giving this movie a 2 out of 10. This movie is offensively bad, but watch as it's spun to be a victory. First, the budget for this film is probably under $50 million, and it's probably going to make its money back overseas. And people are going to say, see, Liam Neeson's still a box office draw. The reality is, no one wants to spend $14 to see this trash. So it's going to do horribly relative to a film that's actually good. Proud Mary comes out this weekend as well. And while there are no screener options for critics, fuck you, by the way, for that, you can't tell me that Proud Mary is worse than Commuter. And let's say it is. Let's say Proud Mary is bad. Why is it that The Commuter, a film that's so predictable, that at the end, I was literally calling out what was going to happen in each scene before it did. Why is it that is the film that studios decided to push? I honestly think it's absurd. I find the Commuter offensive. This is a film that didn't need to happen and quite frankly wastes the audience time by treating them like they're too stupid to notice the obvious plot twists. Later in this year, when inevitably critics, outlets, and even some directors and actors start pointing to superhero movies and Star Wars as ruining cinema, I want you all to remember the shit films like The Commuter and how it's really lazy bullshit like this that's ruining cinema. A studio wasted a lot of people's time and by putting a budget behind a really terrible screenplay, attaching Liam Neeson's name on it, and then making sure the bar was so low they could call it a win, even though no one really gives a shit about a film like this. It's turd-fest films like this that are clogging on the box office toilet. Not blockbuster films, not Marvel, not Star Wars. It's this trash. We've gotten Insidious: The Last Key, which is also garbage. Now this. Make them cheap, trashy, then get just enough returns to justify making another movie. Meanwhile, the overall box office suffers and people whine about why audiences are going to theaters. Well, stop making this trash. Then maybe more people will come. Jumanji was made with a budget of under $100 million and has done amazing because, well, it's good. That's the key. Start making good films and stop greenlighting trash that you set the bar so low for it's impossible for it to fail. Like, there's no way this film is going to fail because, well, they set the bar so fucking low for it. Stop making this trash. This is what's ruining the box office. Find this fucking film ridiculous. The fact that it has a high Rotten Tomato score is also just blatantly, like, it doesn't mean anything. Like, there's only a handful of critics went to go see it. So only a handful of critics actually reviewed the film. And if they went to go to review this shit, they kind of probably are just Liam Neeson fans and don't give a shit. Like, the film is terrible. This is stuff. I want people to remember this film. When you're talking about how, Infinity Wars and Star Wars and this stuff, remember The Commuter. Remember this trash. And then ask yourself, why is it that we can keep making this fucking trash-ass film? Seriously. Anyway, we'll be back later with more reviews. Don't go see this fucking film.